Check 111. Let's check. Let's get this stream underway. Let's do this. Yeah. Yeah. How you doing? You're looking good over there. Chris Courtney here, just checking everything out, making sure the YouTubes have good audio. And we do, which is good. Now we're just waiting on couch about the fire. Hope you're doing well where you're at. This is the daily feedback loop. We do this 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. As students have work for review, particularly if it's work that's of a visual nature or that can benefit from being recorded in such a manner. Earlier this week, I did a lot of written review, which is always useful, but not so much for the viewers who are here to look at design. There's a lot of design that doesn't fit into what people think about being design, and it also doesn't make for really good video content. Just me just constantly reading a document. But that said, I'm glad to have you along. Hope you're doing well where you are. If you are new here, if you're maybe you signed up through the Discord channel, or you're watching this afterward, maybe this pops up in your feed. You've watched one of the Figma videos or maybe a CSS video. Be sure to subscribe, because we do this. We go live all the time, and it's a great way to keep up with what we're doing here. And if you want to be part of the community, it's over there on Discord. Go to newpragmatic.com. There's a big link on the homepage. It says join the community, and that'll get you right into the Discord channels. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and push out of the station. It looks like YouTube's having a little bit of an issue, but we're gonna go on with it anyway. So, greetings one and all. Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. It is time for the feedback loop. So good to have you back. I've got snow literally waist high just outside of the door. Not this door. Not this room, but maybe one room over. As you go outside, literally 3 foot deep drifts. So I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, so I might as well be in here with you folks. We've got a couple students in. Alfonso just barely missed the cutoff for yesterday, so we are going to be reviewing his work first, and then we're going to head in and take a peek at what Ruby has as well. So without further wait, let's go ahead and jump into that. So there's Ruby. We're going to come back to that here in a second. I wanted to make sure that we've got, there we go. All right, so we're going to start here with Alfonso, and I want to focus here a second, because I feel like maybe something's getting dropped in the mix here, because I pointed this out last time that there was a concern with the usage of, let's see here, it looks like it may have actually gotten cleaned up. Let's take a look one more time. Could have sworn, no, it's over here. Okay, this is what was throwing me off. You've got, so you're utilizing the Inria Sans here, but then you still have Lucinda Grand here. And again, I'm not a fan or a hater on either of these selections. I'm a hater of having two fonts that are really similar utilized together. Okay, so I think that now that I'm seeing that this was not utilized in the other two or the other three, I'm guessing that this is just an oversight. So that's what you really meant. But let's take a second and look at these, spacing wise. how are we doing on space? Well, you know, to be completely honest with you, I would like to have some more space around these. And let's just take one of these off to the side, like this one. Let's take this and let's just use auto layout on it. Okay. Um, we we know that we have a. You know, I'm just gonna rebuild this off to the side. We know we've got a width here that we're looking for, um, like so. I'm going to go ahead and add auto layout to it. There's some stuff here that I want to do spacing wise, but I just want to I want to allow us to have the ability to adjust that border as desired. So I've gone through. Let's go ahead and fill that background just so we can see it. All right, so there we have it, and that now we have auto layout here, and as you can see, like I can squish this down, and the borders come with it, and that's all known. The when you have the frame selected, though, we can come in here and begin to work on the padding around, and here, obviously, I've made this 10 now, and the reason why I'm doing that is I'm trying to mimic some of the options down here below that have just a wider or a broader usage of padding. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. I'm also going to go ahead and make these corners rounded, and I'm doing that right here. So having this in auto layout makes it a lot easier right away, and we should be able a lot easier to adjust that border. So instead of doing this thing where I'm like manually trying to measure it in and make sure everything's aligned, it works better this way. I'm also going to pull in this dish, and the first thing you're going to notice is, hey, that worked pretty well. It went side to side, and now if I select this frame, I can actually adjust items in between and move that over, and that's great. Now this is really wide. You may be saying, hey Chris, that's much wider than what you've dictated down here, and you're right. So I'll measure that in, but oh, what happened? Well, it's because I was moving the actual shape, not the I was moving the shape that the frame around auto layout, not the items inside of auto layout. You might also notice, like, you know, that's a lot of space between these two. Well, that's where we could come back into the frame and say, well, maybe I want it to be 10, and now I can measure back out, and that's fine. You know, that's fine there. I sorry, I'm getting a lot of family text on all devices all of a sudden. I need to just take a second to shut everything down. So let's go ahead and take a look at the second piece, though, because you've got this quote here that needs to come in here, and like, how does that work out, right? Because like this is like not going. The problem here now is auto layout. It only wants to work one direction. It wants to work top to bottom or right to left, and that's not working out well at all. And I'm going to totally disassociate my phone number from all family messages. And Ria Sands, so there's that. And you know, this is great. It's going wide, but that's not like really what we need. So to make this happen, we actually have to kind of start over with auto layout. And to do that, I'm just going to drag these two out, and I'm going to say, okay, you two are going to have a set width, and basically I'm going to say, these two are a group, and then I'm going to add it as a group to the. This should still have auto layout with it, so Actually, let's do it this way. Let's turn auto layout off. So remove auto layout. Now let's make this auto layout. So we've added auto layout, and now we will give it some space. We'll fill that. And now, you may be wondering, okay, well, Chris, how didn't mean to add that together. Delete that one. You may be asking yourself, well, Chris, how is this working out? How is this stacking? Well, it's because this is a group already. This was a group, and then I pulled this. I pulled it in, and the second pairing is still here. The problem that I don't like about the grouping angle is this image always wants to scale. So if you're making it skinnier or thinner, and also it's hard to. These are just harder to adjust because it's just a different construction paradigm. It's not like this where as it gets longer, I can really do much with it because this I will push down, but if I go wider, it gets squirrely, and this doesn't follow with it because these are two different shapes. So just understand that, like, if you're doing a construction like this in auto layout, because they're different shapes, they're not necessarily going to just all follow nicely. You'll have to go in here to your resizing constraints and really really finesse that. And there are ways it can be done, but I'm going to add the corners back in. Let's compare this size-wise, and I guess I should probably come back in with just so we can see. So width-wise, this needs to be somewhat narrower, right? So there we've got the basic width. And this again is, if you're wanting to do a design where this content is all to the to the side, where you've got the image and this content and then that quote. Obviously here you've got it a little differently. So I'm going to change this to pair those items together. And this is where the space between this part right here will come into play. So if I put 10 or 20, that's how we get this spacing between these items. And this is still the question here is, should this information be the same size as this? I'm going to go with your answer, which was no, and I'm going to change that to 12. Now the question becomes, okay, so should those be the same size? Should this have some sort of label that says phone, or should it have an icon? I don't know. It's really up to you. I would say that, like on most cards, this would be something that should be tappable. So this is something that you would want to like come through and give it a color, maybe even because it's you can link it. You're basically saying tap here to call. Also up here, your styling says that is more like 10, which is fine. And that's fine. Again, the thing that I like most about this is it gives us the ability to come in and just adjust the padding, which is we don't have when these are all separate elements. So you've got to do a lot of manual adjustments there. So that's one side of this, is just how can we get to the point where this is easier to adjust. The other thing I'll say is, like, as you can see, like if we come down here with Broken Bridge Cafe, which I'll just type it in here. And this is still in Lucinda Grand for some reason, so let's in Ria, I think is the one you had. I think that you can come up in size, and this becomes a bit more interesting. It's interesting. It's also interesting, like, just how the height of this section, like, this is one of those situations where it's, even though the box is lining up, the content is not, and you can see how you can cheat that a bit. Like I'm just pulling up and it's making this box longer. It's kind of pushing things around oddly, but you can't necessarily just manually tweak it, because you're going to end up with some odd spacing here. So those are concerns that you have to think about when you're, but a lot of times that comes down to, okay, how do these let's try this. No, it's not going to work. But how do these fonts that you've selected, how do they fit really into the and you can kind of see it here, like there's just a lot of space to the top. It makes me wonder. Yeah, I think this is partly because of cap height. Like the cap height is so much shorter. But what you can do with these is somewhat limited because of the overall the structure of the font itself. But that said, this gets you into that realm that's a bit more like this. I still like this version, or even this version, a bit more because you don't get yourself into a situation where you could potentially be hanging out off to the side of the content. But this is something that works very well when you get over here to the list versions. The list versions that you have here are struggling, and I think this is actually where you had the mixed typography. So yeah, like this is Lucinda Grand, that's Lucinda Grand. Oh, okay, so it's weird because I thought some of this was Arena Sands. Okay, so it looks like you went all Lucinda Grand here. Okay, great. That's fantastic. Why is fast food the last thing listed here? That part I don't necessarily understand. I like the fact that you lined up this with dining options, but why is there all this space between the cells? Like it looks like you're trying to pad this out, and that wasn't in the instructions. Specifically said don't try to pad this out. The other thing that I would look at here is, what's the overall height of this cell going to be? Is it? I would say that the maximum height should be whatever the space around this image is, and I think this is like 10 to the side, so it's 10 to the top and bottom. I want to look at it specifically at a long name like this Gorditas Patties Mexican Restaurant. All right, so let's take a look at that one. Let's go ahead and just align that to the top to see what we get. Right now, this is 12, that's 12, that's 12, says Mexican. I'm going to lose that really fast. I don't necessarily need it. I don't necessarily know why this is all spaced in the way that it is. I'm just going to make this 0 for right now. I just want to look at it as one unit. First of all, I need the restaurant name to stand out, right? So let's go ahead and make it bold. That's really the only option you've got with that version of Lucinda. Let's give it a larger size, maybe 16. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and knock that down. Not that, and also I'm going to fix this apostrophe. Typically, we see a lot of the tick marks like what you had. To fix it, it's just go in and add the apostrophe. This is where you might come through and you might just say, hey, I want 8 to the bottom of these items, but you can see that like this one's sticking close by. So it's that. But the question here is like, is there a reason for this information to be so far away? And that the answer is I don't know necessarily. I do think that like this could be closer to the image, but this at 12 makes a lot of sense for a phone. This at 16, I could also see like the iOS guidelines would probably be like more like 15 and 12, and then you measure that down and there it is. Now let's come back with you had that tag that said Mexican, right? So it's a Mexican restaurant, and you can't selectively add tags and remove them based on what's in the restaurant name. So it may seem like it's a bit repetitive, but that's okay. Sometimes it's just going to be a bit repetitive. But if that was 10 and a label, that's fine. The question here is, does it need to call attention to itself in any way, shape, or form? Is this a situation where I add auto layout to that, and then I say, okay, well, this is going to be 10, or actually it's going to be 5, and in the background, I'm going to make it, a light. Maybe I make it like an orange or something. Does it need that? Does it have to have that? No. Another thing that I can see you doing is leaving the label at the top and then coming down and having the restaurant name and whatnot like cement itself to the bottom, so that this is basically, you're trying to basically own the interior space of that cell. This is what we call micro spacing. Macro would be like the entire page. Micro would be like the little elements. So this is controlling the interior spacing of one of those little elements. But if you look at that versus what you had here, you should recognize that this is more of how we typically see spacing in a cell than this, where everything here is really set at basically the same size. There's just some like, oh, well, this is bold and this isn't. Like we're trying to use hierarchy and color, although color is actually a little bit further down, but you've kind of been bouncing around the program. But here is where we use hierarchy, we use size, we use space, and I know you've been through the spacing exercises. We use color, where we can use color, but you can utilize all these to produce something that where the typography at certain sizes carries value with it. And you just don't get that really from the other cells that are here. And then some of this is just like, do you want to just tighten up the content and allow the cell to have a certain size? I mean, you could also do something like this where, hey, now I wouldn't do rounded corners in this instance, but the cell's just going to be top to bottom. And here I'll get rid of the rounded corners on that. The cell's just going to be top to bottom, and the content's going to be to the side, like this. Would that still benefit from being styled? Absolutely. But when the one thing that I would say is, whatever you do, and this is where I will kick it back over to you, whatever you do, these should all three have the same style. I think you can pretty easily see like options 1 or 2 are better than option 3. Option 3 just kind of, it's just kind of floating. Option 2 or option 1 would benefit from having you go through and finesse the typography, which is the focus of this exercise, is taking typography you selected and applying it to this content. But, addressing the typography like we have here for this, like even if you went top to bottom with the image, this would still be better. And keep in mind, this was just content when we started. You brought in the images, I did not. Okay, so we're kind of working with the images that you brought in. Back over here to, the card design. We haven't really even pushed this card design yet. There's a lot more that we could be doing with this. If we wanted to really, do this right, and I'm gonna pull this back. I think one of the things that you could do is add an image to the top. Like instead of just doing this little cell thing, I think this is where you would come back and I'm just gonna undo this frame. So there's nothing on the frame now. But if you came back in and you said, okay, well, I'm going to do and part of me is like, do we even talk about this, because this is getting away from we're getting so far away from typography at this point. Now we're talking about image usage and these other things, but I'll entertain it for right now. But you just go with your image all the way across the top, and then you bring this information. You bring this information in underneath. Right? So you don't even mess around with the little square. You just go all the way across. Now, what are the considerations here if you were to do something like that? Well, one of the first considerations that you need to have is like, what's the depth that I'm really working with? Do I have the ability to do that? And my answer immediately would be, well, probably not if the original size is this. And you had some questions down here. What if the card height and width is fixed? Well, the card height and width probably will be fixed. Okay, and if that's the case, what I would say is, in any row, like if we were using CSS Grid, if you had this spaced, and I'm going to ungroup this for a second, but if you had this spaced like this, then, and I'm going to ungroup all of these so that I can do this. These would all be the same height in that row if you were using Grid, because it's just going to say, oh, whatever the maximum height of one of them are, make them all that same height. And then the width, it's going to be whatever the width, so if I said it's a 4-column design, it's going to auto calculate how wide that is. And then as it collapses, if the browser sizes change, this could get taller, that could get taller. And then if that gets taller, this could also move, and when those things move, the rest of them move. They all get taller as well. So I want to ensure that we're thinking about those things. But the big thing that I'm looking for is, what are we doing with the typography? How are we pairing it together? How is this being organized? And right now, I mean, this is closer, but the space is still tight. Okay, over here, this is closer, but the space is very uneven, and it's not really aligning with anything. It's just kind of floating around, which is why I came in. I'm like, okay, well, if we've got this label, let's lock it to the top of that image, and then let's lock the content to the bottom of the image. The question you have is, okay, Chris, what happens if I get some crazy address, like this. I'm just going to come in and copy this over. I'm going to produce a crazy address for us, right? So instead of this nice Americanized address, let's go with something crazy. All right, and now it's like, well, how do we solve for that? That thing is like running right into the label, right? Well, most of the time in cells, you have a overflow point where if it overflows, you say, all right, give me a minimum height, and then if it like, so if I said the minimum height is this, and then suddenly I've got a situation where items are running into each other, it begins to spill over south. And then the question is, okay, when I write this, am I in a situation where this centers? Is it a situation where this stretches? And the answer to that is, I don't know. It depends on the logic. The other thing I would say here is, like, this is also getting into a situation where this is so much text that I really believe like this needs to do something else. But the problem here is I don't have what I would typically reach for here is an italic. I would reach for an italicized version, and I don't have that in the copy of the font that you have currently. And that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't pick this with just the bold and the sans. Now, the bold and the light. Now there is, I think you had in Ria serif, and in Ria serif, at least it has an italic, but it's not something I would pair with this. It's kind of a weak italic. It's kind of just a weak, dainty font. Like it doesn't work at that size here. So I wouldn't necessarily go with that. If I was gonna, I would probably go with a Georgia italic. And you can still see that's pretty limited as well. Merriweather's a much stronger italic. I've got a light italic there. I can even go down in size. Like, if I was looking for that flex here, I'd probably go something like a Merriweather. And now you're beginning to really pair typography together that can, like, here's my serif, or here's my sans serif, here's my serif. Now, and they're similar with similar structure, but there's enough difference here to see what's being used. And this is probably where I would come back with the Lucinda Grand now, and just go with regular, maybe even bold. And now I've got some variety here going on in my pairing, but you don't get that. You don't get that when you're just in Lucinda Grand all the way. Like, now I can't really do. I guess I could do the bold. The bold's not. That's not the worst thing in the world. But that's just something I want you to think about. And again, I pull up Merriweather because it's a font that I'm familiar with. You don't have Merriweather in yours, so this is where in Ria, not sans, we don't want the sans here, we want the Enria serif. This is where you would go to Enria serif to pair, and I'd probably go up. No, I don't really care for that, but let's do regular. So that's not terrible either. So this is, but what I'm trying to really do here, Alfonso, is pair with the typography that you have. The big thing though is whatever's going on in this cell, I need it to be happening in this cell and in this cell. I need it to be consistent between. Again, I've been riffing here. You certainly do not have to follow what I've done. I just want to provide options for you, okay? And here it's, let's get something consistent. This has virtually no styling on it, so level it up. But whatever you do, I want it to be the same for all the cells. And then over here, this is really like trying to determine what is that spacing like for this, because right now it doesn't really have any spacing. Okay, like to the outside, it's right on the edge, and thank you. At least over here on these, you do have these in the same typography. The question I have is, that's great. Should something like this actually be the serif, so that this steps, can we get that to step out and have a different voice? Right now we don't have a different voice in this design because it's all the sans. But if this is, again, I'm working only with the typography that you have selected. Look at the difference between these two and how the voices work. It's like this is very very details about where the shop is and how to get in contact. This is suddenly somebody talking. And that's what your typography should be doing. It should really sound like somebody is talking to you through this quote, and you don't get that when it's all the same. Again, that's pairing. Okay, so went a bunch of directions there. I hope that was helpful. Let's go ahead and take a look at Ruby's presentation. This is for Ridgeline, and one of the things about thinking when you're going in for an interview, a lot of times we have this tendency to, I'm just going to show them my portfolio. And I've had this conversation with Ruby, and she's been like, from day one, she came in like with a presentation mindset about, hey, I'm interviewing for a job and I've got a presentation. The big thing to remember is that you're typically going to be there with it. So does it show what you're trying to say at a very high level? And what Ruby's really trying to do in this case is show the iteration from the original state to the finished state of a project. And this was a refresh where the company that she was working for, they had these cards, and they ended up moving to this more list style card. And the question here is, not always as a designer do I prefer the left and the right, the left or the right, but rather do I understand why they made the switch. And that's really the weight that is hanging on this slide. And if you're showing anybody your work, you need to give them the context of there was a goal. And because without that context of goal, you don't have anything beyond aesthetic to really measure it by. And sometimes the aesthetic isn't going to be your cup of tea as a designer. It's just going to be, well, I don't really like that. It doesn't do X for me. And you have to disassociate that as you're viewing somebody's portfolio, and you have to go, well, I don't really care for it visually, or I don't care for it. There's something about it I don't like, but did it do the job it was intended to do? That's what it should really be measured by, not do I like it. Do I like it? It's a nice side effect. It's a nice, well, it's not even really a side effect. It's a nice bonus if you like it. The real question is, do I understand and respect why it exists the way that it does? So the goal here was you need to improve the UX. There was new branding coming out, and you want to support dashboard and mobile experiences. So the cards had prior problems. You needed a new look anyway, and you need these things to stand out. When we go through and we look at the card patterns, the thing that I like here is you're showing how you studied the problem. So you didn't just rush in and design something. You show how you studied it. Um, this is the V1, so this is like where things started. So like you made a very clear pivot here from the traditional card to a list style, um, and you identified that you had selected a winning pattern here. So now we're seeing you make that shift. Here's now we're showing iterations. So there's iteration 1, iteration 2, iteration 3, iteration 4, and this is the real key. If you can take me through the journey and allow me to see how this moved forward, I think you're going to be in a good spot. And now here's always the payoff that this is what I'm always looking for. Can you show me how it started, or how it started and where it's at? And this is like the classic Twitter meme. But you're taking me each step of the way, and now I can see like, oh, okay, so you put your foot in the ground, and you took it from over here with that initial sketch, and you actually followed through. And you've got these items listed, and I think that this is really helpful. I don't anticipate you to cover all of these items when you're standing there talking to them, but oftentimes they will have a copy of this deck, and this is the type of detail that I like to see. These little I don't want to call it a legend, but these call outs to particular elements. I think this makes a lot of sense to and it also talks. I also see areas where you're like, shapes to distinguish cards, but ultimately chose other visual cues to achieve this goal. So this was like something that was discarded. As you went through, this appeared in one iteration and then it went away. But you acknowledged why. It was why it appeared and then it went away, and then you talk about some other things that you did along the way. Totally like that. Here's the final iteration, how it works from the different screens, and then you're on to the next project, which I like. And here we're talking about flexible tables, and here's where it started, here's where it ended. This is helpful because you're able to, in this particular case, it doesn't really seem like you were starting with a pre-existing thing. It appears like, oh, hey, we need to make this thing. So here's your early sketches. Here's your first iterations. The iterations. It seems like you might have gotten ahead of yourself a bit in the design pattern here, where it's like pretty high fidelity by comparison to, now it gets simplified. You like stripped everything away. So here we go with iteration 3. And what's interesting here is like the table design, like you show the beginning and you show the finish. What I'm missing here on here is I'm missing like this little detail that points out the highlights. I think if you can get that into like a frame where it shows iteration 1, iteration 2, iteration 3, I think the payoff screen where you're kind of pointing to the different highlights, I think that's missing here, because right now I'm you've kind of trained me to look for that because of this, although we've got a final iteration screen after that. I do wonder if final iteration should be right after this, but I don't know. You've got the journey. I don't mind it here. It's just on this tables. I think it's like missing one screen that kind of echoes what that prior experience was. And then we have the admin as well. And first iteration, final iteration. This is one of those ones where at first glance it's like, oh, I don't know if I necessarily like it visually as much as the first one. So you're going to have to do some work to sell them on why this is needed. Um, and I do like the fact that you have a two-sided why. One is the business, the other one is the user. Um, I also like it that in this one you've included a couple of videos, so that can be playing as you're talking. Um, so you've got goals, the handoff, checklist, original plans, scope, final prototype. Okay, and this is a video as well. So again, this is one of those things where I think if I had some sort of, and maybe you're, because in this case you've got a video, maybe that you're gonna be talking about those highlights. Um, I would encourage you to make sure that that's part of it, because I can't tell. I know we're at the end because you're like saying thank you and wrapping up, but I do think that at least here between table and admin, there needs to be like a final like punctuation on table, because it just kind of abruptly slides in to self-serve admin at this point. But this is going to have to do, because the first version wasn't bad, feels a bit like Twitter, but the second version, it gets cleaned up, but the question is, do I understand why it gets cleaned up? And that's where you're going to have to like really draw them in and kind of explain why you made the adjustments that you made. So yeah, otherwise I think this is good. Um, but this one's going to have a little more lifting to do, because at first glance it appears like, oh, is this better? And so I want to know why this is better. So scope the plan, use what you have. Um, so here it appears like you removed the after usability testing, remove the checklist language, remove the launch community flow, added a new invite and grow, and move the progress tracker to its specific section. So this is interesting. I can't tell right away, because this is lacking a label. I don't know what I see V1, V2, V3. I think I'm in the realm of V3 here, but then I have community checklist and I have general settings, but I don't necessarily understand the difference between the designs. I know that they're different, but I'm going to be looking for you to close that gap for them as you're walking through this. Okay. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Feedback Loop. We went really deep in there on typography. Pairing, I'm kind of a pairing nerd, but so much of it is, when we looked at Lucinda Grand, in a lot of ways I like Lucinda Grand more than Enria Sans or Serif. But if you need an ital, which we do when you were picking that apart, it's pretty clear, like, there's only so much that you can do with a font that has a light and a bold. And in Ruby, I think that overall it's very strong work. It needs a little bit of elevation when it comes to sorting out how to really address the transitions, and how to make sure they're following along in that last one, because it's not necessarily apparent from a high level, like what the differences are in those final pages, or what those pages are supposed to be doing. So make sure that you're addressing that, or go in and label them so that people can make that out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for today. I hope that this was beneficial to all of you. If you have not subscribed and you want to know when the live stream is happening, please do so. Click that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. And otherwise, I look forward to, I'm going to see many of you later today. And if you're looking for, if you are out there looking for design mentorship, listen to the new Pragmatic students. They'll tell you what it's all about. All right, take care, everybody. See ya.